As we celebrate WUSA9's 75 years of broadcasting, we turn the clock back now to 1987 and a remarkable documentary that landed WUSA9 on the front page of newspapers across the country. Searching for Justice was an incredible scoop for a local TV station on abortion and on civil rights. As Bruce LeShan reports, many of the Supreme Court cases it probed are still dividing our country today.
Whoever calls the shots determines whether we have integration, segregation, or decency.
The late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, perhaps speaking as candidly as any Supreme Court justice ever, to syndicated columnist and Channel 9 journalist Carl Rowan.
What about Ronald Reagan?
The bottom.
Marshall, after a stunning invitation to Channel 9 to interview him in his chambers, offered an even more stunning commentary on the sitting president, Ronald Reagan, calling him the absolute worst on civil rights and comparing him to the noted segregationist Woodrow Wilson.
The bottom.
Honestly, I think he's down with Hoover. Wilson.
Marshall and Rowan were old friends.
Let's see what we got here. There I am with the justice.
Tyrone Couch was one of the photographers videotaping the interview.
This is Carl Rowan and Justice Marshall.
You've had a long career. You've done thousands of stories.
Exactly.
This thing sticks with you.
Oh, I will never forget this.
This wasn't unusual just for a local TV station to get this kind of access. This was incredible for any media outfit to get this kind of access. Former senior producer Gene Bowers says it took Rowan 20 years of cajoling to convince Marshall to talk.
You may know this is the only interview he ever did since he was appointed to the Supreme Court in '67.
Marshall's assessment of Ronald Reagan made the front page of the New York Times.
First block in all three network news programs.
Rowan's interview with the justice became a best-selling book and won Channel 9 some of broadcast journalism's biggest awards. But it almost ended before it really got started, after Rowan pushed a little too hard.
Justice Marshall said, that's it. Get out. Very harshly, get out. And it was the first and only time I'd ever been thrown out of an interview.
There were more bombshells in this Searching for Justice documentary, which looked at 3 different Supreme Court cases that changed America.
How dare them tell me that I couldn't abort a baby that I did not want and couldn't have control over my own body. That really pissed me off.
Norma McCorvey was Jane Roe from the Roe v. Wade abortion case. And a lot of people were shocked by what she told Channel 9.
You were raped while you were in Georgia?
No, I wasn't.
You were not?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, so all those stories that are in the books and so forth are not true?
Yes, sir. Yes.
She says, no, I wasn't. And I'm stunned. I'm sitting behind the camera like, oh my God. I think at that point, I push in to her face,
Justice Marshall, in the end, was optimistic about America's future.
Oh, we're going to have our setbacks. We're bound to have them, but it'll work. You'd never find a better constitution than this one, I know.
That kind of journalism takes time and money, but Bowers says it is worth it.
I think it's critical. And I think there's not enough of it today. And we're all off in our silos and people are not watching things together.
Channel 9 was a superstar station in this city. And I don't think it'll be any different 10 years from now.
75 years of excellence and impact. In D.C., Bruce LeShan, WUSA9.
Yeah, what an incredible moment in history, right? Interviews with Supreme Court justices were unheard of back then, and they still are today. We cannot overstate how rare that opportunity truly was. And an exclusive for WUSA9 Plus viewers, here's your opportunity to check out that famous documentary from 1987. Take a look.
How dare them tell me that I couldn't abort a baby that I did not want and couldn't have control over my own body. That really pissed me off.
It is an ultimate insult to go in a classroom and find that you are separated from the other 50 or 60 students by several rows of vacant chairs, and your chair is in the very back of the room behind the last row with a big sign that says colored.
He said, if I didn't plead guilty, I was going to die. And I told him, I said, why should I plead guilty to a murder I never committed?
I felt they should have been executed right on that corner of Main and Market Street.
What lies behind those outbursts of emotion? A 200-year-old piece of paper on display here at the National Archives. I'm Carl Rowan. This year we celebrate the bicentennial of the American Constitution, a document that grew over the years to include the Bill of Rights and 16 other amendments. For an unsentimental view of the Constitution, I went to the man who has used it more than any American who ever lived to try to widen the parameters of freedom in America. I speak of Thurgood Marshall, civil rights lawyer, NAACP attorney, appeals court judge, Solicitor General of the United States, and now a Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
The Constitution of the United States recognized slavery and did everything in its power to continue it. As I remember, the Constitutional Convention, they didn't even worry about the women. We have a great Constitution today. I've defended it all over the world, and I'll continue to defend it. But it didn't start off that way. It has become a great Constitution by considering it as a living document, and the legislature passing amendments, and this court issuing judgments. That's what's made it a great Constitution.
But is it a great Constitution in the eyes of Americans who live in a contentious and often violent society? We're going to meet some ordinary people who, in 3 dramatic Supreme Court cases, have used the Constitution in their search for justice.
It means that 101 people presently on Ohio's death row will not be executed, will not be killed by the state of Ohio.
Good morning. Akron, Ohio, once prosperous rubber capital of the world. Some 200,000 people face economic decline, but on Sunday they worship God.
For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
For
12 years, the people of Akron have also had to struggle with the constitutional questions of life and death. Even in a city where virtues like love, goodness, kindness, and self-control are still in fashion, there lurks the painful reality of violent crime. Contradictory perceptions of justice hit this town like gunfire on January 15, 1975. 3 young men entered a pawn shop near the corner of Market and Main Streets. One asked proprietor Sidney Cohen to show him a revolver. The man loaded it with bullets from his pocket and shot Cohen to death. Cohen's widow still remembers that day with horror.
I was numb. I couldn't eat for 3 months. They did not have to kill him to rob him, Mr. Rowan. They did not have to kill him.
But confessed triggerman Al Parker did kill Sidney Cohen. To avoid the electric chair, Parker fingered a 21-year-old ne'er-do-well, Sandra Lockett, as the mastermind of the robbery murder. Everyone agreed Lockett never set foot inside the pawn shop. The prosecutor said she waited outside in a getaway car. Lockett claimed she went around the corner for 2 cheeseburgers while she thought her 3 friends were pawning a ring. In a plea bargain agreement, murderer Al Parker was sentenced to life imprisonment. Sandra Lockett was sentenced to death.
Do you think the person who didn't come into the store should have gotten a deeper penalty?
No, I
than the
think
ones who
they
did?
were all equally guilty and they all deserve the same penalty.
Which
I
is
don't
the- which
believe
is the
in plea
death penalty.
bargaining. Absolutely.
Right.
Here, 160 miles from Akron, at the Marysville Reformatory for Women, is where Sandra Lockett has spent the last 12 years. We found her still proclaiming her innocence and arguing that she was railroaded on to death row, which is on the 2nd floor of this building. Were you surprised when he turned evidence against you?
Yes,
Why do you think he did that?
to save his own life, so he wouldn't get the death penalty. The detectives told him I told where he was at, and he told me, he said, you turned me in, and I'm going to take you with me.
In fact, 6 months after Lockett's trial, Al Parker was back in court, saying he had lied about Sandra's involvement in the murder. The judge refused to believe Parker and ruled that his initial testimony was the truth. Lockett stayed on death row.
The main issue was, can you put someone who played such a minimal role in a robbery and who never intended anyone to be harmed or killed to death?
Attorney Max Kravitz stuck with Sandra Lockett's case, and 3.5 years after the murder, he won a landmark decision before the U.S. Supreme Court. Ohio's death penalty was struck down because it didn't give judges enough leeway to look at mitigating factors, things like Lockett's degree of involvement in the murder. Sandra Lockett, 3 other women, and 95 men walked off death row in Ohio with life sentences. In recent years, Sandra Lockett has become a model prisoner at Marysville. Good behaviors earned her a bunk in the minimum security cottage. She has learned a trade and feels she should be released. Prison officials recently recommended an appearance before the parole board. Unit manager Lori Smith went even further.
I've seen a big change in her. She's matured. She's really settled down. She's put her mind to really accomplishing something while she's here. She's been a pretty good inmate.
Would it be fair to use the word rehabilitation in terms of what has happened to her? That has she been rehabilitated in the public context of the word?
Yes, I would say that.
When you talk to a victim and explain to them, a victim's family, a wife, a parent, a son or a daughter, and explain to them that this person is eligible for parole in 15 years, they're horrified. They're absolutely horrified.
Is it your view that there should never come a day when the people who murdered your husband can walk out of those prisons?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you For example, accept to any degree the stories we see about Sandra Lockett having rehabilitated herself?
No, I do not. No, I do not.
The possibility of parole for Sandra Lockett has reopened old wounds in Akron. It has also reopened the debate on capital punishment, which Justice Marshall opposes on the basis of Eighth Amendment protections.
I'm not going to be swayed by this emotional business. I think that it's cruel and inhuman to kill somebody. They say, well, we had death penalty when the Constitution. That's true. You also put people in jail for debt. You did a lot of other things then that you don't do now.
Apparently the other members of the Supreme Court do not agree with him, or at least a majority of the Supreme Court does not agree with him on that. I do not think under certain situations it is cruel and unusual punishment. I do not.
The difficulty is if you make a mistake, you can correct it. If you put a man in jail wrongfully, you can let him out. But death is rather permanent. And what do you do if you convict a man illegally, unconstitutionally, and find that out later? What do you say? Oops.
Sandra Lockett was sentenced to die after a court proceeding before hurry-up Judge James V. Barbuto. The selection of jury, presentation of evidence, jury verdict, and sentence of death took only 2 days.
They didn't want to represent me. Only thing that the lawyers I had wanted me to do was to plead guilty to life imprisonment. He said if I didn't plead guilty, I was going to die. And I told him, I said, why should I plead guilty to a murder I never committed?
Lockett claims that her court-appointed lawyers were incompetent. What may sound like sour grapes is actually a very serious problem, according to Justice Marshall.
Many of these lawyers, and bless them for taking the cases for nothing, but many of them just do not know their way around the courtroom. And it seems to me that before we take a man's life, we should be sure that he has a lawyer who is at least as capable as the prosecution. And it's just not true.
And then suddenly
The Cohen family doesn't think the legal system is fair either. None of the defendants involved in Sidney Cohen's murder was executed, and Sandra Lockett may go free one day soon.
If a person is guilty of a crime, like my mother said, then they're guilty.
I recall reading that you said at the time, no mercy.
Right.
Do you still feel that way?
I absolutely did.
The anger I will live with for the rest of my days. I also lost my faith.
Lost your faith?
I was Orthodox Jewish. Yes. The day my husband was murdered, he started that day the way he did every day, with a religious service at Bethel Synagogue. And when our rabbi came to me in tears that day, I asked him, and he said, what can I say to you, Gladys? I said, tell me, who did Sidney pray to and what for? Every day.
Gladys Cohen told me that before her husband's death, she was a strong opponent of the death penalty. Her outlook today reflects America's new passion for victims' rights and vigilante action.
I don't think that it will ever be better until capital punishment once again becomes the law of the land. They better tighten up, because otherwise you're going to see vigilantes in the streets of the United States. People will take the law into their own hands.
Now it's obvious that Sandra Lockett has not the resources to pay legal fees. Why have you stuck with this case for 12 years?
I couldn't let it go. I always felt that at some time, some court, somewhere, at some level, would either recognize her innocence or at least recognize that she ought to have had a fair shot at trial to prove her innocence. I thought some court would recognize what I consider to be that historical truth. Unfortunately, that has not come about.
As this case illustrates, people bitterly opposed to each other look for justice in that same piece of parchment.
On the Justice Department walls, it is written that the government wins when justice is done. No, I don't think in this particular case the Constitution has served Sandra Lockett well.
That Constitution, as written and in principle, is perhaps one of the greatest documents ever written by man. How we interpret it from time to time is not the fault of our founding fathers.
I feel I had something to give back to society. I feel I had something to give to them to show them that they were wrong. I'm not the person that their newspaper blew up in the paper to be like Annie Oakley or someone, you know. I'm a woman, I'm a mother. I'm human.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
With the possible exception of the 1954 decision outlawing school segregation, no Supreme Court decree in this century has aroused as much passion and naked violence as the 1973 declaration that a woman has a constitutional right to an abortion. Roe versus Wade, a 7-2 vote invalidating state laws that made abortion a crime, has put Americans at each other's throats.
We believe these men to be on the par of Hitler and the death angel of Auschwitz, Mengele.
The followers were asked to pray for death, the deaths of several U.S. Supreme Court justices who recently voted against right-to-life issues.
Sometimes what God fails to do, anti-abortionists do themselves, like torching an abortion clinic. This fire in Mesquite, Texas did $2 million worth of damage. Justice Thurgood Marshall voted with the majority for Jane Roe and against Henry Wade, Dallas County District Attorney.
Do you get a lot of threats and angry letters and so forth?
All kinds of threats.
Do you have
which
much?
I would not discuss.
Which you would not discuss?
No.
I notice you don't have too much.
I don't want them to know that I know what they're doing.
Have you given any thought to why there is so much emotion about that particular Supreme Court decision?
Somebody with money is behind it. Because when we get mailings, we get 2,000 and 3,000 from one little town that's got 500 people. But you'd be surprised at what some people can say. But they get to correct treatment. We scam.
We took our search for justice to Dallas, Texas, the site of one of the most vociferous anti-abortion movements in America. Dallas is also the home of Norma McCorvey. She was the 21-year-old plaintiff who wanted an abortion and used the pseudonym Jane Roe in the Roe versus Wade case. I went to her home and got a stunning revelation.
But one of the things that led to your being in this case was a very traumatic incident, as I understand it. You were raped while you were in Georgia?
No, I wasn't.
You were not?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, so all those stories that are in the books and so forth are not true?
Yes, sir. Yes.
They're not true.
Right.
For 18 years, news stories and books have echoed McCorvey's assertion
that she became pregnant as a result of a gang rape. She told us she'd made up the entire story, hoping to get an exemption from the tough Texas statute that outlawed abortions except to save the life of the mother.
I found out I was pregnant through what I thought was love. I went to my doctor. He confirmed that I was pregnant, and I told him I wanted an abortion, that I did not want to carry the child because of economic reasons. He told me that abortions were illegal in the state of Texas, and that I would have to go to another state in order to obtain a legal abortion.
And did you have the money to go to another state?
No, I didn't.
Is this a special kind of trauma, of pain, that a woman feels when she's pregnant and knows in her heart she doesn't want to have a baby and doesn't want a back alley abortion?
Trauma. Trauma is mild. Trauma is having a picnic to the lonesomeness, the emptiness, and just being all totally together alone.
Despite her gang rape story, Norma McCorvey never got an abortion. She carried her baby to term and then gave it up for adoption. She summed up her feeling at the time in one word.
Bitter.
And the two look bitter?
Very bitter.
In her bitterness, she allowed two young lawyers to use her case to challenge the constitutionality of anti-abortion laws in Texas and 39 other states. I spoke with Sarah Weddington, the attorney who pleaded Jane Roe's case before the Supreme Court. Would you please tell me, in layman's terms, what in that Constitution says a woman has a right to an abortion?
Well, first, if I said to you, tell me where in the Constitution is the right to travel, you couldn't find it in specific language either. Or if I said to you, what in the Constitution gives people the right to use birth control, if a state says they can't, you can't find that language in the Constitution. But what the court did was look at the history of the Constitution and the fact that the people who founded this country, the ones who wrote the documents that are the basis of our laws, wanted maximum freedom for the individual. The whole purpose of the Constitution was limit government, not to limit the individual.
Weddington successfully argued the case on the grounds of an implied right of privacy contained in the 9th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. On January 22, 1973, her Roe v. Wade victory shared the front page with the death of Lyndon Baines Johnson.
I think that the judgment of the court will do a great deal to tear down the respect previously accorded human life in our culture.
Reaction to the decision was swift and loud, and 14 years later, some people are still incensed.
Pro-choice is pro-ban! Pro-choice is ban!
Unerring and as first unite, all the genetic coding is in place.
Dr. Braun, we know you're in there slaughtering the child at this very moment. Judgment is going to fall hard on you, Dr. Braun.
Make it right. Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that this is right. A woman has that right to destroy that child. That doesn't make it right. It's not good law.
After failing in the courtroom, anti-abortionists have taken to the streets. I spent one Saturday at the Ruth Street Women's Clinic, an abortion facility located about half an hour from Norma McCorvey's home. Clinics like this one have become the battleground in today's war against abortion.
Welcome to the house of death. Enter therein. The jaws of death await you, woman.
How about adoption, not abortion?
Stop the killing now! Stop the killing now!
Demonstrations take place about 4 times a week at the Ruth Street Clinic. There are also regular bomb threats, vandalism, picketing at staff members' homes, threatening phone calls. The morning we arrived, the building had just been splattered with red paint. Winston Wilder, the president of the Abortion Abolition Society, denied any knowledge of the incident, but he quickly let me know that he's not sorry it happened.
we're not involved in illegal activity. We've taken the stand that our group will work within the law, whatever laws are provided for us by our constitutional rights. But we will push those laws to the very limits, getting on the edge, so to speak, and defining our rights as citizens to protest abortion.
Well, a lot of people push it beyond the limits of the law. What do you say, what do you think when you read about a clinic bombing? Shame on the people who did this, or what?
No, as a matter of fact, I rejoice every time I hear one go up. I think bombing clinics is a legitimate activity. I don't have any problem with it at all.
Somebody wants that baby. God's got a plan for that baby. Oh, please don't do it.
2 years ago, the edge of the law meant storming the steps of the clinic, trying physically to keep women from entering. Today, new laws keep the self-described street warriors on the sidewalk, where verbal assaults still take a toll.
They called me a child murderer, and they said that I was killing my baby and I shouldn't killed a baby. I don't really feel that I could have the baby right now. I'm also a chemically dependent person, and which means I'm recovering from drug addiction.
From drug addiction?
And I've been clean for about 8.5 months, and it's not been easy. And I don't think I'm ready to raise a child. You know, I love children, but I don't think that I'm capable of doing that right now.
Are you going to change your mind, or are you going ahead with the abortion?
I'm definitely going to do it.
Why don't you get out of the baby-killing business?
We feel like that even abortionists deserve death, and while we wouldn't kill one, we would probably picket the funeral and give him a good send-off to hell where he belongs.
Are you going to go home and tell those little children that they're...
While Winston Wilder contemplates what he considers the ultimate solution, other pro-lifers see the battle moving to the courtroom again. Lewis Powell's resignation from the Supreme Court has rekindled hopes and fears that Roe versus Wade may be dealt a fatal blow.
Do you have any fears that these things might happen?
None at all.
Even though
I believe in the court.
So you think that Mr. Reagan cannot be sure what his new appointee is going to do?
Thing, the only sure way would be to get on the court himself.
Ron, tell the national press how you pointed a gun at our people. How you may be going to prison for 2 to 10 years. Tell them about it, Dr. Brian, you murdering butcher.
I don't call you a doctor, I
Grand jury has...
No matter who sits on the Supreme Court, no matter what happens to Roe versus Wade, Americans with conflicting views about abortion will cling to their own interpretations of the Constitution. The conflict will go on.
So you really have hopes of overturning Roe versus Wade?
Whether the Supreme Court overturns it or whether in this land there is another revolution, the second American revolution in this land, that people are saying enough is enough. The perversion of law, the perversion of medicine must end. And if the courts are not going to carry that through, then there's going to be another revolution.
Do you have any regrets that you put the baby up for adoption?
Some nights I do, some nights I don't. It all depends.
Are you as certain of your support now for the right to abortion as you were when you were pregnant and didn't want to be?
More so.
Segregation here was just as rampant almost as in Alabama, but they wouldn't come out in the open with it.
These are modern scenes at the University of Oklahoma. whose former president George Cross once stunned the state legislature by asking it to finance a university our football team can be proud of. There were no scenes like these when Cross arrived in Norman, Oklahoma in the 1930s. The football team was still lily white in 1948. Today, almost half the squad is black. The student body and faculty were all white. The university town of Norman was rigidly Jim Crow. President Cross got a lesson in race relations, Oklahoma style, on his first shopping trip downtown.
The salesman in this store, knowing that I was new, of course, undertook to tell me a few things that he thought would be useful to me. And one thing he said that really jolted me is, you'll never have to worry about a nigger problem in Norman. And I looked at him inquiringly, and he said, we have an unwritten law that niggers can't be in Norman after sundown.
A few black people in Oklahoma read about the blessings of liberty in the preamble to the Constitution and noted that those blessings flow faster to people who get good educations. They were determined to give black youngsters access to the state university, but they needed legal help. Gaining national fame or notoriety was a young Negro lawyer from Baltimore. Thurgood Marshall had been denied admittance to the University of Maryland Law School, but he soon won a court decree forcing the admission of another black man.
Well, number one, they wouldn't let me go to the law school because I was a Negro. And all through law school, I decided I'd make them pay for it. And so when I got out and passed the bar, I proceeded to make them pay for it.
Was this sweet revenge?
Wonderful. I enjoyed it no end.
Blacks whose children were relegated to an unaccredited college called Langston sought the help of Marshall.
He was about the only lawyer that we had, which meant if you had a problem in Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, any other place, Thurgood had to come to your rescue.
As the guinea pig for a constitutional challenge against racial exclusion at the University of Oklahoma Law School, Marshall and local black leaders chose 21-year-old Ada Lois Scipule.
I remember thinking what a splendid test student they were bringing, a beautiful child, beautiful girl, poised and intelligent.
We cannot be selective in granting and protecting rights. Everybody's rights have to be protected, but nobody's rights are going to be protected.
Ada Scipule Fisher is now a professor at Langston.
It is the ultimate insult to be told that you cannot attend this tax-supported school simply because you are black. I know of nothing more insulting than that.
Defying some state legislators, Cross gave Scipule a letter stating that she was qualified for admission in every respect except her race. That gave her access to the Constitution.
Mr. Marshall and the other lawyers of the team went to court with me, Cleveland County in Oklahoma. When the court recessed for lunch, we had no place to go. Norman was such an anti-black town that I think the first day we were there, we were kind of caught short-handed and we ate peanuts from a machine and drank Cokes. Thereafter, we carried bologna sandwiches.
The Supreme Court said Oklahoma had to provide Ada Scipule with a law education as soon as it provided law training for white students. Oklahoma's politicians created a phony black law school in 2 rooms of the state capitol building. Frustrated by the Scipule case, Thurgood Marshall got the Supreme Court to order Oklahoma to admit to graduate school a retired black professor named G.W. McLaurin. Oklahoma lawmakers said McLaurin could be admitted, but
separate classrooms, separate teachers, separate toilet facilities, separate eating facilities, separate library facilities, everything separate. My academic vice president said, well, why not put a partition in the room, just a railing or a rope or something, and call one side of it room 13A and the other side 13B, and it could be separate classrooms.
Much of the nation was outraged by photographs of a lone black student, McLaurin, sitting in a sort of broom closet off the classroom, where he presumably would not contaminate the white students. In June 1949, Ada Lois Sippuel finally was admitted to the University of Oklahoma Law School, but under similar Jim Crow conditions.
It was an insult to have to go in the dining room together with the other black students who were down there and go through a side door to go and sit behind. There were 2 or 3 folding tables pushed together with a big iron chain around it and an armed guard standing there, so that when we went in, we had to go through that chain and sit down. Those were more lasting insults to me than what some person on the street said or someone on the telephone whispered.
On June 5, 1950, an embarrassed, emboldened Supreme Court took another look at the Constitution and declared segregation on the Norman campus illegal. And that is how black quarterbacks and running backs have come to carry the Sooners to big money bowl games and national championships. But that may not mean racial justice and equality campus-wide.
After you stayed here 4 years, you know that there's racism, but it's not blatant. It's not outright like maybe at the University of Michigan or something like that. You don't see people going around in white sheets, but you know it's there.
It is at Oklahoma State University, too, where the big story during our visit was a blackface extravaganza.
It was, for the most part, an orderly discussion, but it's been a troubled week at OSU. It started with a fraternity event called Plantation Week and a blackface serenade by members of the White Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity. These pictures were taken by a black student.
Has progress in education gone as rapidly as you would have hoped and expected?
No, it hasn't. There's been certain avenues open. OU can and OSU can go all over the United States and find football players and basketball players, but they can't find faculty.
If there is integration, it's in what? Football and basketball, and that's about it.
We saw some things at Norman that belie this gloomy portrayal, including a brand new student body president, Terry Carr, who got more votes than her 3 white male opponents combined.
What does that tell me then about what goes on this campus? That the old ideas of racism have faded away and this is a truly integrated campus?
To a great extent. I think more what it says even more so is that the students at this campus were willing to deal with the candidates on the basis of issues and experience. And our daily newspaper did a fantastic job of giving everyone an opportunity to really evaluate the campus. And race just wasn't a big factor, I don't believe.
More than 4 decades after Thurgood Marshall went to the rescue in Oklahoma, the evidences of progress are many and quite visible. But the picture of failure has real and jagged edges. Mr. and Mrs. Ira Hall, 2 integration pioneers, made that clear.
Do you think racism is rising on these campuses?
It's rising all over the state, worse and worse in every angle, daily now.
In retrospect, are you willing to admit that you won a celebrated battle, but that the segregationists still are winning the war?
The biggest thing we brag about in this country, on the ethical side, is that it's a great melting pot. Well, as I sit and look at it now, at this late date, I have come to the definite conclusion that if the United States is indeed the great melting pot, the Negro either didn't get in the pot or he didn't get melted down.
More and more
Dr. Ada Sipiel Fisher, now a professor of law and a grandmother, still talks with anger and outrage, tempered by wisdom bestowed by time.
It is simply a fact that blacks cannot become content, cannot decide that we are here physically, we have it made. The struggle has to continue.
I don't care whether he's the president, the governor, the mayor, the sheriff, whoever calls the shots determines whether we have integration, segregation, or decency.
I asked Justice Marshall to rate some of the presidents who've influenced the search for justice during his lifetime.
I don't think Roosevelt did much for the Negro, but I think Truman's going to come out on top. Eisenhower, I don't think did anything except to try to undermine the school decision, which he did. Kennedy was held back by the Attorney General, his brother. His brother said, don't do anything for the Negroes because you won't get reelected. Wait until you're reelected and then do it. And then he got killed. But Johnson, his plans were just unbelievable for things he was going to do. But he was too far for Negroes and civil rights. He wasn't thrown out because of Vietnam. They just used that as an excuse to get rid of him.
You think he was the greatest civil rights president we ever had?
In my book, he was.
Justice Marshall told me that when he was ill with pneumonia, Richard Nixon was so eager to appoint someone to the Supreme Court that he called an officer at Bethesda Naval Hospital for a prognosis.
I said, well, Admiral, you have my permission to give it to him only on one condition, that you put at the bottom of it, quote, not yet.
What about Ford?
Nothing. Nothing. I don't think he had a chance.
What about Jimmy Carter?
Generally speaking, I think his heart was in the right place. But that's the best I can do with him.
What about Ronald Reagan?
The bottom.
The bottom?
Honestly, I think he's down with Hoover. Wilson, when we didn't have a chance or nothing.
Yet he's been one of the most popular presidents the country ever had in the polls.
Is he more popular than the average movie star?
Out in the legal and emotional war zones of America, we found differing opinions about America's presidents and about the Constitution itself. Who cares enough about the Constitution to celebrate its 200th birthday? The President Emeritus of the University of Oklahoma does.
Without the Constitution, there would have been no basis for a suit.
And the woman who filed that lawsuit?
I will be celebrating the anniversary of the Constitution, yes.
Are you celebrating?
No. No. Until it can treat everyone equal and show no colors, no faces, no races, then that's the day I probably celebrate.
No, I don't think we'll be celebrating the Constitution. We may mourn its demise.
What does that Constitution mean to Norma McCorvey?
Life, liberty, and freedom.
How close are we Americans to securing liberty? What are the constitutional perils of the future?
Oh, we're going to have our setbacks. We're bound to have them, but it'll work. You'd never find a better Constitution than this one, I know.
Some lovers of history tell us that a miracle occurred at Philadelphia 200 years ago. But the miracle may be that for 2 centuries, most Americans have found the Constitution flexible enough to command their trust and respect. Yes, some people curse the Supreme Court, Some resort to violence. But as long as Americans search for justice, they will come to this repository, to these charters of human freedom. Or so we must hope and pray. Thank you for joining us.